In 2015, a Hollywood reporter's secret files held a strange note that was found by accident. It named 3 famous people as gay, and even more shockingly, James Garner was one of them. But that wasn't the end of the shock. Later notes showed an interview that had never been made public before, along with a list of 6 famous stars that Garner had dated in secret. The list included a legend that the FBI was looking into, an unapproved mentor-pupil relationship with a movie star, and a gentleman whose tragic death left him with an unhealed wound. What did they look like? The most important question is whether Lois Clark, his wife of almost 60 years, knew about these relationships. People knew James Garner for being calm and quiet. People who worked with him for a long time said he was a skilled actor who didn't want the press to know about his personal life. Small cracks didn't start to show up until after he died in 2014. Some papers began to show pieces that had not been made public before. These included handwritten letters, personal notes, and guest lists from parties held behind the scenes. The most shocking parts were the notes that talked about Garner's close ties with several famous male actors at the time. One important unreleased document, thought to be a record from a Warner Brothers production helper, said that Garner often went to secret parties in Beverly Hills and at the Chateau Marmont Hotel. These events were private places where gay people in Hollywood could be themselves. According to one researcher, many special connections began in these smoke-filled, music-filled rooms. Now the painful question is, which names made it into Garner's orbit? Watch the whole movie until the end, because the last name will shock you. One was Rock Hudson, a love one couldn't have while the FBI watched. Rock Hudson was the first person James Garner really loved. In the early 1960s, Hollywood was full of shocking stories like, "Homosexuals are living among us." There was a witch hunt going on in the movie center, and one rumor could ruin a career. At this point, Rock Hudson was being watched by the FBI because they knew he was gay. Hudson lived like he was being chased every day. When the phone would ring, he would hear a strange click on the line. Was someone listening in? He felt like a ghost followed him every time he left the studio. Hudson was at his most hopeless when James Garner came into his life. After a well-known case against Warner Brothers, Garner went to a movie promotion event for Pillow Talk. Among the cameras that were flashing, their eyes met. Garner could see the sadness behind Hudson's blue eyes because he had a lot of understanding. At first, Garner was just a helpful friend. But as they became closer, their friendship turned into an unbreakable emotional link. They had a dangerous relationship even though Hudson was being watched by the FBI and was even held hostage at one point. While Los Angeles was still filled with smoke and music on Saturday nights, Garner would drive up to the Hollywood Hills in silence to meet Hudson. To get away from managers, he even paid someone to pretend to be him, which was a great way to hide their secret dates. Hudson told Garner about his fears of being betrayed by spies who were hiding in the shadows, and his desire to be himself in a villa in the Hollywood Hills that was far away from everything else. They had a rare bond because they were both weak. One night their feelings got too strong. Garner was interested in Hudson, and Hudson felt wanted and safe around Garner. They would sleep next to each other until just before dawn. When Hudson saw Garner lying on a couch, he looked at him and said, "James, if we really get together, we'll die. Not from bullets, but because the whole world will kill us with its judgment." This made Hudson feel better for a short time, but it didn't last. Their jobs and lives would have been over if a picture got out. Garner came back to the big screen with Grand Prix, playing a tough, unbeatable character. Hudson kept being Hollywood's Prince Charming. His smile was beautiful, but his heart was hurting so much. According to close friends, they kept in touch until Hudson died of AIDS. Rock Hudson wasn't the only person who made a deep impression on Garner, though. After that bad love, someone else came into his life. Yes, this is Marlon Brando. There was an illegal mentoring and the invisible hand that brought down Hollywood moguls. Have you ever thought about why James Garner, who was known for being quiet and not getting into fights, was able to go to court and beat some of Hollywood's biggest names? The answer is hidden in some papers that aren't as well known. There was a big shadow behind Garner all the time. That person was Marlon Brando, who is known as the Godfather. They met for the first time in New York at a small acting class. He was from Oklahoma and was shy. Even though Brando was already famous, he walked in with an arrogant air and looked over at Garner. He did not teach with ideas. Instead, he grabbed Garner's collar and growled, "Don't do anything else. Be honest, you weakling." This shocked Garner. He almost cried, but instead he realized he had found a great guide. From that day on, Brando and Garner had an affair that they kept secret until Garner became a popular star. In the 1970s, their old teacher-student connection turned into a relationship they didn't expect. Universal was putting too much pressure on Garner with the Rockford Files, and his routine was so full that it was wearing him out. Garner thought he was taking a big risk when he chose to sue the studio, one that could ruin his career. But Brando showed up out of the dark. He learned how to be a smart planner. Brando's letters to Garner were like a knife cutting through his fear. "They are not needed." They were never required to be honest. That letter was kept in a drawer by Garner, who read it over and over again before every court date. A scared Garner would sometimes leave the set, go to Brando's house, and fall asleep like a child. Not many people know this. He would hold him tightly and say, "Don't worry. I'll carry some of the weight for you. You are not alone." The next morning, when Garner Bold was in front of the press, he looked very different. Are set on responding to charges without mercy. It's strange that Brando never showed up in public with Garner. He only left his apprentice letters written by hand. The public saw a strong Garner, but they didn't know that there was always someone there to catch him when he was about to fall. Both of them are now historical facts. Hollywood only talks about the huge cases and movies that will never be forgotten. They never talk about the nights they held each other in the dark, as if they knew everyone was against them. For Garner's legacy isn't just about his acting skills. It's also about the fact that in his heart, there was always Brando, a teacher, a lover, and the ultimate strength that helped him see the fight through to the end. But Brando's letters were only the start. Someone else in Garner's life left notes under a coat. Cary Grant. He hid love letters and scary notes from her before he died. Hollywood was a bright place in the late 1950s. James Garner, the hot, impulsive, and charming young star of Maverick, ran into Cary Grant in the sea of stars without realizing it. The debonair man was seen as the perfect person. The two would often try to hide from the cameras at fancy parties in Beverly Hills. Garner would quickly slip a folded note into Grant's hand and tuck it under his jacket in a quiet area. They would act like they were two normal men by exchanging jackets and making jokes. Everyone didn't know that behind this front were shaky love letters full of jealousy, desire, and fear of being found out. They would burn the notes in a fireplace so that reporters wouldn't find them. Some nights, they would cut the letters up into tiny pieces and light cigarettes on them, which slowly destroyed them. When they left the room, the only thing that was left was a knowing smile between them both. In 1958, Confidential magazine made a big deal out of a rumor that Cary Grant was gay. After the shooting, James Garner was not seen in public for almost 6 months. Everyone thought it was a marketing stunt or that a rising star was just tired at the time. But now that all the pieces are in place, we know it was a man's last-ditch effort to hide a love that everyone else thought was wrong. When asked about Grant in 1983, Garner gave a short, easy answer. Hollywood never told him what kind of person he was. Everyone thought it was a praise at the time. But after Garner died in 2014, people started to remember the truth. In Beverly Hills, an unsent letter was found among Cary Grant's things in a drawer of an old wooden desk. Grant wrote in shaky hand, "James, my only regret is not being able to hold your hand in broad daylight in front of thousands of eyes. You gave me a second chance at youth, and if there is another life, I would choose you without hiding." James Garner cried like a child when the letter was finally delivered to him. The man, who had always been cool, broke down and held the letter close to his chest like it was the last thing left of a love that was never named. They never told everyone how much they loved them. But in the bright and dark world of Hollywood, Garner and Grant were deeply in love, recklessly and tragically. They kept it a secret until they died, leaving behind a scary sound that still makes people uncomfortable. But the notes that were only half burned in the fireplace were just the start. After that, Garner moved on to a different story where love wasn't about secret letters, but about a battle for life or death with an angel that was falling. Here are four stories: Montgomery Cliff, a love story that saves the day, and the sad death of a movie angel. Montgomery Cliff, the star with the most beautiful face in movies, spent the last few years of his life as an outsider in the bright lights of Hollywood. Not only did the 1956 car crash tear his face apart, it also killed him. Cliff turned into a walking dead body, stumbling around on sets and hiding behind bottles of alcohol and pills that his friends avoided, and that people in the crowd talked about behind his back. At this point, James Garner, a young man who had just been successful with Maverick, decided to walk toward Montgomery Cliff. Everyone else turned away, but Garner saw in Cliff not a broken man but someone who was begging for help very badly. At a fancy party in Beverly Hills, Cliff was the only one there. Garner went up to him. He put a glass of wine on the table and said in a low voice, "You're not a wreck. You're just a prisoner." It wasn't a romance. It was a last chance to save her life. The next few nights, Cliff's small room in New York became a safe place for both of them. Garner didn't fight or lecture Cliff. He would often sit with his eyes closed and whisper, "I'm rotting away, James. No one can save me." In silence, he held his hand. Cliff would cry some nights and put his head on Garner's shoulder like a kid who is easily hurt. He would whisper, "You're not rotting. Hollywood may turn its back on you, but I won't." That's when Cliff found a reason to live, not for his job, but for love. There were no stage lights or public statements of love in this love. There was only darkness and whispers at night. Cliff found a spot where he could take off his mask and be weak without being looked down upon. Garner was the only light left. He couldn't fix the broken face, but he could save the soul that was bleeding. Cliff first felt like he was valuable when he was in Garner's arms. He realized that even the most evil soul could be saved if there was someone brave enough to say, "You're still worthy of love." Montgomery Cliff died alone in his New York apartment in 1966, at the age of 45. People in the news said it was the slowest death they had ever seen in Hollywood. In his things, there was a box full of pieces of paper and letters that didn't smell like anything that were addressed to James Garner. One line in shaky handwriting said, "You're the only reason I wanted to live one more day." Garner cried when he got the box. A man who was cool, strong, and well-liked by many fell apart like a child. He held the pieces of paper close to his chest and said Cliff's name in a whisper. After the fact, Garner's friends said that he kept a small piece of paper from Cliff in his pocket for many years. But this love didn't just leave behind tears and memories. After that, while the movie scenes were still flashing, Garner quickly got into another dangerous relationship. 5. The Cliff Robertson. A meeting behind the scenes and a shocking find. Around the middle of the 1960s, James Garner and Cliff Robertson were known to be two people who lived at the same time, worked together, and went to a few events together. At first glance, it looked like it was just a business connection. But what happened behind the scenes told a different, more dramatic and scary story. While they were shooting, Robertson would often leave the set during breaks. And more than once people saw Garner quickly walk down the hallway way to the makeup room. While the crew thought they were talking about the script at first, rumors spread when a wardrobe assistant opened the door by mistake. Being shocked by what she saw, Garner and Robertson were sitting next to each other on a couch, almost touching their heads. While the makeup was being put on, Robertson put his hand on Garner's thigh. When she found them, they were startled, but they didn't run away right away. Instead, they looked at each other, faked a smile, and said they were just practicing a scene. A few people did believe the lie, though. The story quickly spread through the group. The team didn't say anything outright, but as the knowing looks and laughs grew around Garner, they had no choice but to tell the production manager what was going on. The crew's mood started to change in the second half of the project. Friendly staff members now looked away from them. Some people even said mean things. Leave them apart or something bad could happen. Even though no one said it directly, Garner and Robertson knew that someone was watching them, so getting together became a dangerous habit. Robertson would say he was tired and go to the makeup room early. After a few minutes, Garner would come after. When the door shut, they would rush to each other like they were dying for love in a stuffy room that smelled like makeup and had harsh electric lights shining on their faces. They kissed quickly because they were always afraid that someone would open the door at any time. One day they jumped when the doorbell rang. Robertson pretended to look in the mirror right away, while Garner stood with his arms crossed and laughed as if they were just talking about a scene. But when the person left, they looked at each other with racing hearts. To answer, Garner only gave her a tight squeeze on the hand. Their relationship was intense and painful because they felt like they were being chased and backed into a corner. They couldn't go out in public or breathe easily, but they also couldn't stop. It was risky to meet in the beauty room every time. They would either lose everything or keep the secret. Their love turned into a dangerous adventure because of that risk, which stopped when James Garner got tired. The secret talks that took place in the makeup room were just the beginning. After that, Garner started dating someone else, but this one wasn't loud or easy to catch. 6. Roddy McDowall is the man in the dark in Hollywood. Back in the late 1960s, James Garner was famous for his rough TV character, and Roddy McDowall was shining in Planet of the Apes. Hollywood started to talk about a strange link between the two men, who didn't seem to have anything in common. Roddy McDowall was known as Hollywood's man in the shadows. He was always well-dressed and quiet, and he had a group of male actor friends who were closer than usual. McDowall was known as Hollywood's secret guard because he was good at putting together secrets. A lot of people knew he had a long list of popular women he liked, but not many were brave enough to say it. On that list, James Garner was always brought up with a hint of envy. They met at a party in Beverly Hills for artists, where McDowall often brought his Rolleiflex camera to take pictures of friends. McDowall was haunted by the first picture he took of Garner, in which the actor was looking away with a half-smile, as if he were not paying attention. From that night on, they met privately every day. McDowall told Garner he was going to show him his collection of photos when he really wanted to show him his house. But when the door was shut, they would talk and drink wine all night, and then something more than friendship would start to happen. Garner, who usually stayed away from the press and always seemed like a good guy, found Roddy to have a rare sense of understanding. McDowall did more than just act. Besides that, he knew how important lies were. Even though his living room was full of pictures and tapes, Garner let himself be seen as a real person, not just a character on TV. Roddy, who was always kind and had sad eyes that seemed to hold all the weight of the world, became a safe place. There was nowhere else for Garner to go. There were always reports in the business world that they were dating. Someone once said in a whisper, "If you want to find Garner on a Friday night, don't go to the studio. Go to Roddy's house." McDowall always kept their relationship a secret, making it a part of Hollywood's secret club. Nobody saw them together, and they were never seen together in public. But the private photos McDowall kept, the audio tapes of Garner reading poems, and the short letters hidden between script pages became silent proof of a deep and sad love that no one could name. A love that was hidden behind Hollywood's glitz, but strong enough to make them remember each other long after the cameras stopped rolling. So what part did Lois Clark play in this marriage that seemed to be going so well? Was she paid to get something done? In 1956, James Garner met Lois Clark at a party in Los Angeles. After only 17 days, they got married. Hollywood thought it was a stupid and dangerous choice. A famous person married a normal woman from outside the business who was also a single mother. People at the studio were shocked, and friends even bet that the marriage would end before Garner became famous. They were all wrong, though. This relationship that seemed short-lived turned into a faded bond that lasted for almost 60 years, finishing only when Garner died. Lois Clark chose to stay out of the press while they were married. She didn't walk the red carpet very often, and turned down all interviews, even ones from Hollywood's biggest newspapers. People didn't know much about her because she was barely mentioned in news stories about Garner. Lois was the heart of the family, though, inside their home in Brentwood, California. Kim Garner's stepdaughter from a previous marriage and their own daughter, Gigi, born in 1958, were raised by her. Both of them dodged the movie business and chose a quiet life. Gigi later took over her father's business. That being said, Lois Clark wasn't just James Garner's quiet, loyal wife. In 1975, when he sued Universal Studios for breach of contract, Lois revealed a secret role. She was his quiet right-hand woman. The UCLA Law Library has records that show Lois was at most of the private talks. She looked over every contract and took notes like a real lawyer. What she learned about business at a community college turned out to be a secret weapon that helped Garner win the case and keep his good name. But some people were afraid to say it. Was Lois more than just a loving wife? Was she also set up to be a cover, a guardian in the background, whose job it was to keep Garner safe from all dangers, especially the biggest one? The truth about his sexuality? Many people later asked, was this almost 60-year marriage a true romantic love? Or was it a secret contract, a safe wall that let Garner live two parallel lives? Lois Clark knew so much about Garner that she sometimes knew things he would never dare to say in public. She decided to stay quiet for decades, turning down interviews and avoiding the press as if it were a rule that could not be broken. She would always be buried with what James Garner wanted to hide. In 2015, some draft notebook entries thought to be from Lois were found in a private collection in Santa Monica. This was a shocking discovery. One line said, "He didn't hide from me. He just didn't want to be turned into a headline." Pop culture experts still argue about how true this is, but they see it as proof that Lois knew more about Garner's personal life than anyone else, and chose to keep quiet because she thought it was part of who he was. The Garner family has never said anything public about the rumors about his personal life. They neither refuted nor agreed with them. She just sent an email answer when asked about her father's legacy. He did what he pleased with his life. We might not need to talk about what he didn't say any further. Lois Clark wasn't a Hollywood star or a fashion icon for almost 60 years. Instead, she was a strong woman who stood in the background, giving Garner a safe place to be alone, and keeping the secrets he took with him to the grave. His life wasn't always calm, though. In March 1960, the famous tabloid Confidential shocked Hollywood by publishing an anonymous article with the shocking title, "The Western Man with a Private Life Stranger Than Anyone Else." The article was about a young TV actor from Oklahoma who avoided fancy parties, was rarely seen with female stars, and often showed up at secret events with a mysterious group of male artists. Even though the name wasn't written down, everything led straight to James Garner, who was the star of Maverick at the time. Garner was very angry. He sent Confidential a legal notice threatening to sue for defamation if she tried to hint again. This had never been done before. Because of this, the magazine had to take the story down and make sure it didn't show up in the next issue again. Variety stated that the event happened, but they didn't say anything else. This was one of the few times that Private, a tabloid that made Hollywood afraid, had to back down. James Garner, who was normally seen as a gentleman, became a rare steel wall who dared to stand up to the whole tabloid machine. After that, Garner had a strict rule with the reporters. He would only show up in TV Guide Time or other real movie magazines. He wouldn't answer questions that weren't about the subject at hand, stayed out of all issues, and said nothing about rumors. Garner's public image stayed the same for decades thanks to this strict control approach. A movie star with no flaws. Talk behind the scenes, though, told a different story. The lighting techs, crew members, and even some editors who used to work with him all agreed. Garner was nice, but he didn't get too close. He would stay away from parties and leave the set alone. If he saw too many reporters, Warner or Universal would often cancel last-minute events they had planned. Stranger still, some longtime crew members said that Garner often went to private events with a close-knit group of male actors, such as Rock Hudson and Anthony Perkins, but no one ever saw him bring a female artist with him. In the 1980s, the media forced a lot of Hollywood stars to talk about their sexuality or private lives. For example, Rock Hudson was forced into a fake marriage, and Tab Hunter was scared that she would be found out. The whole time Anthony Perkins was alive, he was a scared ghost. James Garner had not changed his mind. He was never caught, never had an incident, and never was accused of anything. At least on paper, he was perfect. But for people today, that complete silence is now seen as strange. Because everyone knows that Hollywood is never really honest. When Garner died in July 2014, there was a lot of doubt on internet forums like Reddit and communities for old movies. People looked for clues by going through old photos, news stories, and even each and every interview answer. They found one, a haunting line on a diary page that was shared anonymously in March 2015, and was thought to be Garner's. "There are people I cannot name, but the memories of them have never left me." The photo of the diary page went viral, but it was never proven to be real. People on Reddit and secret groups of classic movie fans rushed to figure out every word and mark on the page. The Hollywood Reporter jumped in right away and asked a question that sounded like a charge. Was a whole generation of stars pushed to live in the shadows just so companies could build huge commercial fronts? Right away, historians who study pop culture and experienced reporters started to look at history again. They raised Rock Hudson and made him get married to keep up his image. Tab Hunter was told by his boss that he would be exposed if he didn't follow the studio's rules. Anthony Perkins lived his whole life in fear, hiding who he really was. Then they pointed out the strange connections that James Garner also tried to hide. Lavish parties was almost never seen with female stars, and usually went to small private events with a small group of male actors. But Garner was never found out, unlike the others. The mystery got even more suffocating in this dead quiet. Lois Clark, his wife, dodged all interviews and wouldn't say anything, as if she had a secret key that should never be used. And Gigi Garner, his daughter, wrote one line on her own blog. "My dad kept some things for himself. That's okay with our family." They didn't say yes or no. They just weren't sure what they were saying, which seemed to say more than quiet. From then on, James Garner has been the subject of a discussion that will never end. Several people thought he was a unique star who lived a pure, trouble-free life. Doubters see his quiet as a sign of a huge secret, a truth that he has buried with him, and that Hollywood may not have wanted the public to know. You're not crazy if you still think someone hasn't said something. What we see and hear is just a bright light shining on a smooth surface. If you bow your head down, you can still see detailed dark spots, cracks, and secrets that are locked away like a coffin that no one dares open. A tale isn't just made up of praise and fame. It was also made with fear, sacrifices that were never named, and quiet fights that were never planned. There is a pain behind every smile. Every round of applause is based on a haunting passion. Some facts look like they've been buried for decades. Still, one old piece of paper with a shaky line is enough to remember everything. As the cracks get bigger, a scary question keeps coming back to mind. Was what we thought the whole time just a curtain? Is there a deep, empty pit behind it that no one has ever reached?